So got the rifle, giving commands over to PA. Other guys come who also have rifles. How many other rifles came out? 0, right? So you got a good rifle program. You got rifles. It's right there. Just unlock the thing, take it out, charge it, and get ready, right? Especially somebody wanted for a murder, right?
Another guy, felony stops.
Yeah. A guy who just menaced someone with a handgun and got in a lengthy chase with NYPD, and now he's stopping for me, which probably tells you he threw his gun out the window or something. And then another guy got in a gunfight. So wouldn't you want to use your rifles there?
And I'm like, I'm in jeans and a t-shirt. I'm like, oh my God, what did I get? It's December.
Welcome to hell.
Yeah. And I was like, what did I get myself into? Like, it's the first time I've really, I deployed and was in the heat for, 10 months overseas. And like, that was an experience, but then like, oh my God, I'm moving here. What am I doing? Like, it is December. It was snowing 3 days ago. I was in, jeans and a jacket and hats. And now I'm like pushing a cart through the grocery store parking lot. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm not ready for this. Like,
New York could be like that too.
Oh yeah.
I went through 2 police academies. The second one was the State Park Police Academy up in, it was actually at the NCON Academy in Oswego.
Okay.
So SUNY Oswego. So you get all the lake effect snow.
Yeah.
And they were merciless. We get up at like 5 a.m. to do PT, and you'd be running and you'd think you're about to step on snow because we're running in the snow and there's like a pothole and like it's filled with water because it had rained first or whatever, and you're like soaked and whatever. But you would deal with that, and then let's say it was a Friday night. You had to live there from Sunday night to Friday night. So you leave there, it's freezing, you're driving in a blizzard because you just want to get home, and it was like 5 hours away or whatever it was back to Westchester County, and probably 3-4 hours into the drive, you're like, I'm still getting a little warm. Took my jacket off, and maybe a long sleeve shirt by the time you got home was good enough. So New York can be a little weird.
Well, down here it's 98. That's temperature and humidity.
Yeah. So. Do you like to go by Ken or Kenny?
It doesn't matter. Either way.
Cool. I guess I'll roll us in.
I guess so.
Okay. Guys, welcome to the Big Tex Ordnance Podcast. I'm Ian. We got Camera Homie. We have Andrew from the range and Ken from Stretz Tactical.
Stretz Tactical.
Okay, perfect. Well, welcome, and let's do this thing. Ken, why don't you give us a little background story on who you are, what you do, and what you're here teaching.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm Ken Stretz. I own Stretz Tactical. It's a mobile firearms training company. My background, 9.5 years in the Army Reserve. Did 1.5 years as a communications support soldier in 1st Battalion, 11th Special Forces. Had a goal of becoming a Green Beret. Unfortunately, 11th Group got disbanded before I got a chance to go to selection. So I transitioned into military police. Did another 8 years divided between a National Guard MP company and then actually, I think it was the other way around. But Army Reserve, did I get that right? Yeah, I went to the National Guard first from the reserves and then back to the reserves. Got out just before the GWAT, so I missed out on that. Been a cop in New York for a little over 27 years. Started with the NYPD, did several years down there. Left the NYPD, moved around a little bit, worked at the state, county, and local level in a variety of different capacities. Foot patrol, bike patrol, marine patrol, highway patrol, undercover prostitution enforcement, presidential and foreign dignitary security details, SWAT, firearms instructor, armorer. Started my current agency's first patrol rifle program, ran that for about 11.5 years up until just recently. Also recently got them, and we were kind of talking a little bit before about red dots and stuff, got them go from 40s to 9s and lights and red dots, so into the 21st century just recently. Was involved in a line of duty shooting, another incident a few feet away from another officer who got in a shooting, responded to a lot of shootings and stabbings as a police officer, in addition to being involved in dozens of incidents where people that were armed with guns and knives that were successfully resolved without any shots being fired. So I've taken those experiences I've had in the streets in New York, coupled them with my military and law enforcement training, and having attended over 150 shooting schools in the commercial sector as a student, and I forged Stretz Tactical. It's a mobile firearms training company, provide handgun, shotgun, carbine, low light, and force on force classes. I've taught classes from Connecticut to California and New York to Texas. I'm going to be here tomorrow on the BTO range doing, what am I doing tomorrow? Marksmanship.
Right.
Marksmanship.
Yeah, I'm shooting that class tomorrow.
Right. That'll be fun. So yeah, I incorporated May of 2013. And I've kind of had the gamut of students, right? Civilians, military, and law enforcement, being near Indian Point nuclear power plant. I've had nuclear security guys, private security guys. I've done some work in the entertainment industry, training actors and stunt performers, done some on-set armor work, some technical advising in TV and film. That stuff can definitely be interesting. I mean, you look at the Alec Baldwin stuff, and I could tell you some stories of like how things go, and you just shake your head. But they don't live in our world, and we don't live in their world. And sometimes, like in the entertainment industry, you gotta kind of meld and play nice and ignore them when they're saying Democrat things. They're because you're doing a job, and it's like you don't have just same as being a cop, right? Like you don't really have a First Amendment, right? While you're working, when you go home, you have the First Amendment again. But like, what if you say something stupid off duty? Or we had a boss years ago who had been sent. I mean, he was kind of set up, but he did it anyway. He was sending around like racist email jokes and stuff way back in the day, and someone wanted to get rid of him, and they're like, "Hey, do you still have those emails?" And then the guy got shown the door. So you really don't have a First Amendment. So I'm kind of used to that in the police world. Or you said you're in the military, right? Mm-hmm. Like you really can't. I mean, maybe nowadays you can say something if it's along Democrat lines. You could probably say whatever you want, but generally, when you're in uniform and you're representing other people, you don't necessarily have the freedom of speech. And you're working in the entertainment industry, you're working for other people. So it's kind of the same thing. So there's been some parallels there, and it's, you may not like it sometimes, but I don't like some of the stuff I deal with in the street. And being a cop, how many times have you been called, racist or this or that?
Well, the good news is back then there was no email. There was no internet. So
you're saying if we were able to dig some stuff up?
Oh, I don't know the statute.
No cameras everywhere following you around.
No, if there was a camera, it was like this big, so you knew that guy had a camera, right? So you deal with that first.
And you were what, 5 years as a police officer yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
About 5 years.
Then you got smart.
And then, I mean, the body cam thing has been huge.
Yeah, I came on when that was getting incorporated.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
I've had body cams the whole time, basically.
Yeah. We still don't have body cams. I've worked other places where we had dash cams, and honestly, I wish we had them. And I've begged for them in the past, and there's talk and whatever. And I obviously, my First Amendment, thing, I'm still active, so I got to watch what I say. But where I work, affluent community, but also surrounded by the Bronx and some other high crime areas. So we deal with kind of the worst of both worlds. You have more affluent people who, hey, maybe you can't write me a ticket or arrest me because I live here kind of attitude. Yeah. And then people like
who need to go to jail.
Well, the people who need to go to jail, like, all right, arrest me again.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll be out in a little, we had a guy not that long ago, shoplifter, ran, fought, took multiple guys to get him down. He had a gun on him. So like resisting arrests, larceny, obstructing governmental administration, disorderly conduct, and criminal possession of a weapon. And in 3 hours, he got an appearance ticket and went on about his day. So.
I have multiple friends that are New York State troopers and then cops outside of Buffalo. And they said the bail reform is just crazy. Dudes with guns getting out within 3 hours. And
it's not just that though, right? Especially, excuse me. If you look at like New York City, right? It's its own animal, always kind of has been, but you got the bail reform thing, but there's also something called the diaphragm law. So I don't know if it just pertains to NYPD guys or if like we're not allowed to cross the border. If something happens, we chase someone and we cross the border, there's really got to be, and we've done it a few times in the last, a couple of years, but there's really got to be a reason because could you as a non-NYPD officer be charged under this diaphragm law? And what it is if you put pressure on the neck, chest, back, or diaphragm of a suspect, whether or not you intended to, whether or not they were injured, you as a uniformed police officer or detective, whatever, could be arrested and charged with a misdemeanor. So
now, did that come into play after the George Floyd thing?
Yeah, that's exactly why they came up with it. And then the other thing is they took away their qualified immunity. So, and if people don't really know what that means, it's qualified immunity is basically if you acted within the guidelines of your policy, right? You did everything legally correct, administratively, procedurally correct, you would be indemnified. And you kind of need that to happen, right? And people are talking about it with the president and all of that. And maybe that's a different conversation. But I understand that argument too, because if you start getting sued all the time, and the more active you are, you guys know, the more active you are, the more civilian complaints you're going to get, the more lawsuits, all of that other stuff. You need to have that protection because who's going to put their house on the line all the time and their cars and their bank accounts to do the job? You need to have the qualified immunity. And then the other part of it is if you go off the rails, and you start beating someone or doing whatever, then you lose your qualified immunity. That was always the case, but now they just took it away from you. And the way I understand it is the union, the NYPD, PBA, and I may be wrong, but just from what I've heard from guys, they're taking care of any lawsuits that might come up. So you don't have to go out and get like a malpractice insurance like a cop would get, or a cop, doctor would get. So the union's taking care of you. But what if it gets that big or things, there's more and more lawsuits? The NYPD union, and people like to say it's a weak union, and they said that back in the 90s when I worked there, but the NYPD union was strong back then. I'd seen guys that, I got messed with by a particular boss and like just coming after me and making things up. And all of a sudden the union steps in like, look, either fix this or we're going to lawsuits and this and that. And all of a sudden things get shred, pulled out of like it never happened because it shouldn't have happened, and they righted wrongs. And, guys that were problem children, maybe not necessarily bad cops, but, probably needed a pee-pee spanking here or there. They, even though they represented the cops, would go, hey, boss, come here. Let's have a sidebar. We got to do something with this guy, And so it was a pretty strong union, and it may not be perfect. Nothing's perfect, but so yeah, you got to deal with that. The diaphragm law, the qualified immunity, and then the bail reform. And the NYPD, I'll take a step back. Look at the younger generation, and I don't know about like this industry behind the scenes or whatever, but you look at the younger kids coming into the workforce, everybody gets a trophy generation. They don't want to do anything. So you also have that where younger guys, and I can definitely tell you on smaller agencies for sure, but even on some bigger ones, because we interact with different agencies, nobody wants to do anything. They want to make everything go away. But I think back to when I was NYPD, and I would divide the department back then in thirds, right? So you had a third of the job would just do enough, right? They wouldn't shit can anything, but they weren't going out there and getting after it. You had your guys that shit canned everything, and I've seen things and just like scratch my head and like, what the hell was that about? And then you had, the sergeants would call us pit bulls. The guys would like go out there and like, wouldn't do anything crazy, wouldn't do anything wrong, but we're looking to be proactive, good cops and get after it. And so there was always some people that did just enough or made things go away. And now this younger generation, trying to get a cop to do an accident report if you get in an accident is like pulling teeth, and it screws people because what happens is they'll do an information exchange, right? And then say you rear-ended me or whatever. I get this information exchange. It looks like a police report. It's got numbers on it and stuff like this. And this is multiple different agencies. I've talked to guys that do this. I call you and say, hey, it's going to be a couple $100. Well, maybe you don't like that, and you hang up the phone. You never answer the phone again, or maybe you don't answer the phone to start with. So I call the insurance company, like, hey, you're insured. He hit me, blah blah blah. They open the claim, but now you don't answer the phone when the insurance company calls. So now they won't process the claim, right? And then they come back to the cops and like, hey, where's the accident report? I thought this was a report.
Nothing.
There's an incident number, but it's not an accident report number. And it's just like crazy, and you're screwing people, but just because they are too lazy to do an accident report. Just do the work, do your job.
It's become so specialized in larger departments now that a patrol unit gets on an accident scene, they're going to say, well, call me a traffic unit out here, call me an accident unit out here. At least that's how it was in the city just south of us.
Okay.
So they have accident units that do that primarily. And even in rural Texas, if it's an accident on a highway, the county will say, get DPS out here, get the state out here, do the wreck. So.
Yeah, the only time that happens, at least where I come from, is if serious physical injury, someone's likely to die, or someone does die, then it gets reconstructed. But outside of that, you get accident investigation training in the academy. And let's face it, for the most part, accidents, it's kind of obvious who's at fault. Maybe there's times where it's like, he said, she said, like, did he pull out or he not, sometimes it could be a little, and then you just write it that way, driver 1 states this, driver 2 states that.
Yeah, let the insurance company figure that out.
Yeah, but there's guys who will just always make it ambiguous. And I've seen guys, this accident was not witnessed by this officer because they think they're going to get sued, and then they get teared apart in court.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing, like, coming here was, like, there wasn't really culture shock. It was driving. Like, driving in Houston, in our area, is nuts. People are just flying all the time, traffic all over the place. I mean, it's, and I've thought, like, man, should I get, like, a dash cam for my car? Because it's like, how do you prove that in this day and age? You know, if the police aren't going to do it, then at least I have it. Like, yeah, this guy pulled out in front of me. I mean, but yeah, it's like, how do you prove that if they're not going to do the report and the paperwork? And yet it's a zoo out there driving, you know, on 99 and 45, people are doing 85, 95 miles an hour, not blinking an eye, texting.
So that's the difference. So you're from truly upstate New York. People call Westchester County upstate if they're from the city of Long Island. But I'm shocked that you're not used to that from New York, but I guess from where you come from, it's not a thing. But
no.
Where I am in Westchester, and I would say anywhere kind of like in the Hudson Valley, it's insane. People just merging, right? People getting on, they're supposed to yield when they get on, they won't yield. And then the person who's right away, like they won't yield. The next thing you know, there's an accident and, you know, people cutting people off. And, you know, the people who cut you off, who are supposed to yield, will curse you out, give you the finger. And like, what are you doing? It's like, dude,
I hit the right away.
Yes. and if I see something like that while I'm working and give someone a ticket, like I'm wrong. You know?
Yeah.
Like, no, dude, you caused an accident, or you almost caused an accident or whatever. So but I think it's regional here in Texas. So was up in DFW last month and everybody drove fine. But it's funny we were having this conversation because yesterday I noticed, like, man, there's a lot of aggressive driving in the Houston area, but DFW, it wasn't like that. Have you noticed that in different spots in Texas?
You could probably speak on that more than I could.
I mean, it's. I don't know if it's aggressive driving. It's just preemptive defensive driving.
Yeah.
But absolutely. If you get out, even here in Montgomery County, if you get out into the rural areas, you're just as liable to find yourself behind a guy in a 1974 Chevrolet pickup truck going 35 miles an hour, you know, with 700 bales of hay in the back of it. I mean, it happens out here.
Yeah.
So, in the cities, absolutely, because everybody had to be somewhere 10 minutes ago, and they didn't plan well enough to be there 10 minutes ago. So now they're trying to make up for it by driving like an idiot.
Yeah, that was my biggest thing. Like, I mean, driving on the 90 isn't, you know, it's 2 lanes isn't that bad, but you get on 45 and it's 12 lanes, 14 lanes across in some places. And it's just, if you're not keeping up, you're in the dust or getting run off the road. It's crazy.
So on the training side of things, do you see a big difference geographically from training, you know, in all these different areas? Do you see a big push geographically for we need to focus on, or we're more interested in probably this type of class versus another region, this other type of class?
So just from some things I've seen online, it seems like down here you guys are more rifle focused, you know, and up in the Northeast, you know, again, I'm based in New York, right? So it seems a lot more handgun stuff, but there is a gun culture up there in these, even in California, there's a gun culture, right? Like a lot of people like to think or say that, oh yeah, our state, you know,
what people don't realize is that the state of California is the single biggest domestic gun market in the United States.
We can track, like, for the orders on the online side of things on where everything goes. And Texas is our number one ship state that we ship stuff to, but California is a extremely close second on stuff getting sent. I mean, it's crazy how much stuff we get. People are like, there's not guns in California. No, there's a lot of people in California.
And even the handgun thing, they have to be on the DOJ approved list in California, so on and so forth. But California is the only reason why Glock still makes Gen 3 guns, because those are on the list. So they buy a lot of a very small
same
variety.
thing with the Gen 4s. Are they illegal out there?
No.
So I'm trying to remember, because I had a conversation with a Glock rep not that long ago. I think Gen 4 still exists because of NYPD. They won't. I just had this conversation with my buddy who works there yesterday. The Gen 5s are failing. He wasn't sure what was failing in the gun. I don't know how much. I have 4s and 5s. I've had 3s. I don't know how much is different internally, but something's happening with the Gen 5s.
Everything with the 5. None of the 5 plays well with anything before.
But like whatever NYPD's torture test is, and I don't know what regiment they put them through, they're not passing.
Interesting.
So
I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah, like right now they're looking at red dots, and they just finished up. Aimpoint was just up there doing some training with them, and they were using a different brand of. I won't get too much into their stuff, but using a different brand of gun. And prior to that, I was told ESU had Gen 4 factory cut slides for the Acro. So whatever's going on with the Gen 5 and whatever kind of torture test NYPD does to it, they're not passing. I carried my Gen 5 for a while. Now I carry a macro just because it's smaller, and sometimes my front-mounted rucksack gets a little fuller than other times, so it feels better to have a slimmer gun. But I had a Gen 5, and matter of fact, I'll be shooting Gen 5s tomorrow at the class here. My duty gun is a Gen 5, and I pushed them to go to that, and so I don't see any issues with the Gen 5. But getting back to the training thing, I think part of it with New York. So when I started my business, started in May of 2013. So back then it was before the SAFE Act, but you can have pre-banned guns, right? So
as long as they existed in.
Yeah, it had to be there before. I'm trying to remember now, since all these laws have changed so much or whatever. It could look like an AR, but if it had a collapsible stock, it had to be pinned. It couldn't have a muzzled device, or maybe if it was pre-banned, it could have a muzzled device. And I don't remember.
Mine couldn't.
I think it was the dates, right? You might remember some of this.
So I bought an AR when I got out of boot camp, and it could not, buttstock couldn't collapse, and it could not have a muzzle device. So I had a M&P Sport with a fixed buttstock, and then it was just like a bull barrel.
I got one of so Colt made the MT6400. It's kind of the same thing. I got one of those from my nephew back in the day. But so people would do carbine classes and stuff, and then when the SAFE Act hit, people are like, I don't know what I can have. I don't know what's legal.
Mine didn't leave the. I had mine before the SAFE Act, and after the SAFE Act, mine didn't leave the safe. It didn't see the light of day for years until I moved to Texas.
Well, a lot of those went into effect after the federal assault weapons ban sunsetted in 2004. That went into effect in 94 and sunsetted in 2004, and that's when a lot of states jumped on, said, well, okay, the feds have stopped, but we can enact legislation on the state level. So that's where a lot of states came in with their assault weapon ban, is in response to the federal ban sunsetting. So
yeah, the SAFE Act went into, was like 2010, 2012, something like that.
I don't remember the exact date. But you're right. Like New York's carbon copied the federal one minus the sunset thing. So it was the exact same thing. But then with the SAFE Act, nobody knew. And so basically what ended up could happen, you can have your pre-ban gun, register it, and then you could, and this took a while for people to figure out, and now you can unfuck it, for lack of a better term. You could put a muzzle device on it, you can remove the pin stock, and you can have it in whatever configuration.
But it's points, right?
I don't even know. I don't think there was points. I think you could fully go back. I don't know how many people did. There's people, I'll talk about it in a second, like people are they're coming right up to the edge. They're crossing, the line, right? I don't, people get the bootlicker comments ready in the comments or something like that. But people will, because people are tired of this shit. It's all unconstitutional, and eventually it's going to get overturned, right? Firearms Policy Coalition's doing a lot of good work, and we just got to keep pushing that and get more stuff in front of the Supreme Court, and it'll get turned around. But initially, when the SAFE Act thing happened, carbine classes just nosedived. And I had a buddy, Mike, that was working at Stag Arms. They had some New York compliant guns, which became, do you guys remember the Thorson stock? Kind of look like a bicycle frame.
Yeah.
So they would have these New York compliant guns, and no muzzle device, the Thorson stock, which is, it got you your gun, right? It's ugly to look at, right? Or people would do fixed magazines. You would have a regular
from the top.
Yeah, regular looking gun, but you couldn't get it. And that is a problem, because if people get double feeds, like how do you clear it out? The bolt's out of battery. You can't break the gun open. So you got to break the magazine to get it out of the gun to clear your double feed. And I'd get people, hey, can I bring this? Like, no. Oh, but I really like the way this looks. That's cool. But why did you buy it? You bought it in case things, Kyle Rittenhouse type scenarios. What are you going to do if the gun double feeds in that? I need it scenario. You're not going to be able to clear it out. I'd rather have an ugly gun, that's bastardized, but functions the way Eugene Stoner designed it to function, right? So, and I get people not wanting it to look that way, but it is what it is. And there's been some other things like the Hera stock, right? I don't know if you guys have ever seen that. It's like the thumb hole stock, but you can put a plate in the middle. It kind of looks like a stormtrooper gun.
We see those on Cali guns because we routinely decalifornicate rifles for people that have moved here. So we routinely do that at the range, take the Juggernaut system out, put a real stock on it.
So, I mean, I think that's, as long as you get an ambi safety, I think that's a better way to go. Looks nicer, kind of easier to manipulate and everything than that. But that's an option. It took took some time to get people used to that. But what I ended up doing, since I saw a nosedive in the carbine class registrations, I talked to my buddy Mike at Stag. Hey, let's do a range day, and we'll do a New York compliant range day. Excuse me. And you guys give away a rifle, I'll give away a carbine class. That'll, free stuff. People love that, and it'll do two things. It'll sell more guns for you guys, and it'll sell, get my class registrations back up, because people are going to go, okay, the gun's kind of ugly, but at least I can still have this, and I can do the training. And we got a ton of people that came to it, and guess what? Rifle sales went back up. Carbine class sales went back up. But now the others came out, right? And can you shoulder the brace? Can you not? But eventually you could shoulder the brace. So people were doing that. And then you had 30s pinned to 10, right? Or in New York City, you can only have a 5-round mag, so you'd have to pin. And there are New York City legal guns, believe it or not. You can have, I dated a girl who lived in Manhattan, and I got her a Fight Light SCR. You ever see those? So it's like a Remington 870 or whatever one of the semi-auto versions are. It's got the, you take your bolt out of your AR, and it's got its own proprietary bolt carrier that has a dog leg that goes into the stock. And the stock in those Remington shotguns, it's got a little, a female end, for lack of a better term, that the dog leg goes into, and there's a spring in there, kind of like the buffer. But then you take, you put that in a regular AR upper. So you can have a half AR. It's like a Franken AR or 870 type of gun, and it takes AR mags. It's a little, kind of like the SIG Regulate, right? Or regulator. Yeah. It's kind of like that. So that was out, years before. Safety, cross bolt safety, so it's not as ergonomic, but you'd have to get a rifle permit or a long gun permit. It's good for rifles or shotguns in the city. And then trying to get 5-round mags back then, this was like 2014. That function, that was a chore in itself. So I think I ended up buying her 10-round Magpul P mags, and I found blocks that would block it, and we, glued it and whatever. So, but now people are tired of it, and I'll tell you a story. So I just had a guy in a class last week before. He was at an indoor range at a carbine class. He's like, dude, I was the only guy that had a legal gun. They all had regular ARs and 30-round mags, and in the same sort of indoor ranges in a place where there's like an airsoft field or whatever. So at this airsoft event, somebody stabbed somebody else. So now the people on the range, like, someone got stabbed. Oh shit! No, really, oh shit, because the cops are coming. Yeah. So the whole class emptied out, but him, and threw everything in a car and got out of there before the cops came, because they were afraid of getting locked up.
This dude got stabbed, but let's check everybody's mag capacity.
You know what's going to happen, though. Things start to calm down, and then it's like,
hey, but what's that?
Yeah. Well, that mag looks awfully long.
Yeah. And I could see that, that happening, right? And there comes a time whether or not you believe in a certain law or whatever. You could be super pro-gun, and you can be whatever, but, something happens, and then a boss is like, oh my God, that's illegal. That person can't have that. Lock them up. And then what do? Say no, and cue the bootlicker comments. You give up your pension. You follow the Constitution. It's easy for people to say that, but your wife just had your third kid, and you got a mortgage. And what do? What do? What are most people going to do in that situation? There's probably 1 or 2 out of 100 or 1,000 that would say no, I'm not going to do it, and turn in their badge, and that's cool. But they kind of get you by the what. So if you do that, you got to do it knowing full well that you're taking that chance, and then that's the chance you signed up to take. And yes, I get it. We take an oath as police officers, right? We got 1 current and 2 former, and service member. We understand oaths, but don't put guys in that position. If you want to have your stuff put away for a Kyle Rittenhouse, McCluskey's type incident one day that could, and every day it looks like we're getting closer and closer to something else happening. So I get that, and I wouldn't fault anyone for that. And most cops probably don't care. Most cops aren't gun guys. What you have, it's like, hey, whatever. But there's also guys that are not gun guys that just want to go out and do the right thing. And to them, they're following the law, They're not really thinking so much of like being super constitutionalist or whatever, right, wrong, or indifferent, and they think they're doing the right thing, you know. And in police work, more so in the high crime areas, and you probably not like got to get the gun collar, right? Got a lot, but I don't want to lock up a guy who's, you know, just a good guy who just doesn't believe these laws are constitutional. I want to get the gangbanger, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of that. Where I am, we're seeing a lot of guns, a lot of 80% stuff, and I see people say, oh, we got to ban the 80%ers, and I get it, because there is a lot of 80%ers and the Glock switches and stuff like that. But how about we just enforce the laws we have on the books? How about we bring back or get rid of bail reform so that when you lock a guy up with an illegal gun that just shoplifted, resisted arrest, fought the cops, that now that guy pays for his actions instead of hurting everybody, hurting honest Americans, or just exercising their Second Amendment rights, right? So there's that. But I see it too. Like, I know a couple of guys, one in New York and one in the New England area. They got FFLs and they'll get whatever, you know, suppressors, 30 round mags, whatever, you know, bring, you know, handguns or whatever to different states and take classes and teach classes and do all. It's like, dude, that, you know, at least in New York, because I've heard it from guys that do gun investigations, like, hey, have you heard about this guy? He's doing, and I'm like, whatever, that's your, he's like, I'm not going to do anything, but somebody else in the task force sees that, like, that guy's going to get hemmed up. You can't use it for personal use. So guys are trying to figure out every which way they can to just exercise their rights. And really at the end of the day, like, people, oh my God, suppressors should be off the NFA. We all know it, right? It's better for your hearing. It's not like movie quiet, unless you got maybe an MP5 SD, they're pretty quiet.
Yeah.
But, and with all the others and the AR pistols and the braces, why are SBRs even a thing anymore? Just get, at this point, it's so stupid. But so I get people doing whatever they can do to get around things, and we've had enough. People are fed up, and I get it, but you got to be smart about it. Like, if you're going to have that stuff, you know, tuck it away for a rainy day, but then you also got to realize the rainy day comes, you might be 100% right in the shooting you got involved in, but now they're going to take that gun for evidence, and they're going to go, we're going to charge you with this, we're going to charge you with that. But politics also plays a role. Not too far from where I live, there was a Jewish community that, I don't want to say came under assault, but had multiple attacks over a few days or whatever. And it was a Hasidic community, and they came out. There was press conferences. The cops were there. I think one guy got stabbed. Another guy got hit with a hammer or something at a party. So the entire community came out with regular ARs, with regular magazines, right? Drums, the whole 9 yards. The news took pictures standing next to sheriff's deputies, and they didn't get locked up, right? And I know guys from that sheriff's department. I know that sheriff, and I was like, hey, what's up with that?
What's going on with that?
And they're like, you know the sheriff's an elected official, and you know who tells the congregation how to vote, right? And I love my Jewish friends. I've done some training for synagogues. It's not like an anti-Semitic thing or anything like that. Don't get me wrong. But why? It's political. Like, we're not going to prosecute you, right? But everyone else, we're going to prosecute. Like, how do you? So now if something happens in that county and those sheriff's deputies arrest.
Hey, look at this picture.
Yeah. How is that fair? Right? So it's got to be fair across the board. And people see that, and that's why they're, you know, going around the back door and doing whatever. And you can't blame them, right? You can't blame them because it's all unconstitutional, first and foremost. But there's two sets of rules, you know, and people have had enough. And look at the debates last night and how they're not spinning it too much. I mean, I think it's obvious who won that, and they're saying that, but they're trying their little things, and it's one set of rules for one part of the population and another set of rules for another set of the population. But the only thing I would say to people out there that are, you know, skirting it or coming over the line is just be careful, because is it worth it, right? Kind of like, I look back into how I got into training and kind of the void that existed in New York. So it was like 2013 on YouTube. And what's kind of my home range now, a range that I grew up on as a kid shooting, my agency used to use. We used it for SWAT school and stuff like that. Super familiar with the range. I'd never heard of anyone doing training back then. Didn't even know of any private companies. There was a few guys like the celebrity instructors or whatever that would like sneak into Long Island, do stuff, and sneak back out. But at least in the Hudson Valley, you were from upstate. I don't know if you could speak to back then, 2013 timeframe. Nobody was doing anything in New York, right? So I'm surfing YouTube and I see this retired cop and he's doing a class, and I'm like, wow, like I didn't even know you can do that, at this range. I'd never heard of that before. And like I said, you did a lot of training there with the departments and stuff. And I was like, and I watched it. It was typical cop training. You guys know what cop training's like. I can't speak to Texas, but, up by me.
Well, back in 1982, it was a little bit different than it is now. But yeah, and that brings
You still
up,
had flintlocks?
yeah, just about.
Okay.
Percussion caps.
How was the Civil War?
I am
kidding.
I am the oldest guy in the entire organization.
Was George Washington really the honor grad in your police
No,
academy?
he was an asshole.
It was the teeth, right? Those are the wooden teeth.
Wooden
and
teeth
the
clacking.
cherry tree thing. And yeah.
Here's a good question. Teaching law enforcement and teaching civilians, there's a different mindset. Which do you prefer? And that's a loaded question. That's putting you right smack on the spot. But
Well, it's an easy question. Law enforcement.
Two different motivations, first of all.
It depends on the cop,
Sure. Yeah, valid.
right?
Valid.
Most cops are not gun guys,
Right.
right?
And a lot of times they're there because somebody told them, a boss told them, hey,
Yeah, you're gonna be at the range at Monday at noon.
Yeah, so they're pissed off already.
I know an agency, and I won't say it again. You don't have First Amendment rights until you retire. But I know of an agency that they had a really good patrol rifle program, right? Multiple day basic. This is how to run an AR type of thing. And every year they would have a full day class, and it was from what the guys told me, that was soup to nuts. From this is a forward assist to transitions, shoot out to 100 yards, all the different malfunctions, low light, full, like everything you could do. And the guys were telling me it would take between the middle of day 2 to the end of day 2 for your average non-gun guy cop who'd never shot an AR to get used to it. To some guys, maybe middle end of day 3. And their requals was a full day. And generally in that agency, I guess training was always come late, take a long liquid lunch, leave early. But now with the guys that were running that rifle program, and people got promoted, didn't like guns, didn't like going to this location, didn't like doing a full day. And then, yeah, okay, he got promoted. He's going to make this go away. And he did. And what happened? Shorter range, where instead of shooting like 100 yards, now they're shooting at 25. Instructors show up an hour late, and then you start shooting and keep taking breaks and take an hour and 45 minutes for dinner and leave an hour and 45 minutes early. That's the training that most cops want. They want that second one. They need the first one, right? Larry Vickers used to say, I'm not here to give you what you want. I'm here to give you what you need. And that's the mindset that a police firearms instructor should have. So the mindset of teaching cops, if you have the average cop, it sucks. Like when I taught at work, I was glad to do it. I was glad to start my agency's patrol rifle program. I was glad to be able to push them in the direction of getting red dots and all that stuff. But teaching them, I'd rather have the cops that come, like some of the NYPD guys, they're going to red dots. And I had some of them come to me for a private red dot instructor class. And those guys are great. No complaining. Not like, hey, what time are we going to eat? Hey, can we work through lunch and leave? Like none of that.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to be there. They wanted that certification. They wanted to be part of this pilot program for getting red darts started with NYPD. Those are the cops I like training. The other cops, like, I hate it. I had a guy tell me one time, this is too much. This is like Army training. Like, no, dude. If this is like Army training, you'd be doing push-ups and, I'd be beating you and like, whatever. And it was just, we're going from one thing to the next. You'll see tomorrow, I don't take a ton of breaks. We'll take breaks here and there, get some water, top off mags, go to the bathroom. But I want to maximize the training time. And then civilians are great to teach because they're paying. It's not like I go into their house and I drag them out and I bring them to the range.
They've got skin in the game, at least monetarily.
They want to be there.
They have $300 plus ammo of being there.
So
For sure.
what do you think, if you had to pin it down, what would you think is the single biggest advancement in the training aspect of it, whether it's law enforcement or civilian? Would it be the common out or the commonplace use of red dots on handguns, or patrol rifles? I'll tell you right now, patrol rifles didn't exist when I was on the street. It just didn't exist. But it's common now, even in big cities. The guns existed. We just didn't carry them. I was just
say the invention of the semi-automatic handgun.
The invention of black powder. We did
carry revolvers. I will tell you that.
I'm so jealous.
Yeah, but I carried a big one.
Hell yeah.
But anyway, red dots, which are everywhere. Even the big Houston PD uses red dots.
Now they're the standard. I mean, Michaela's
they have to have one.
Yeah, that's on the list of
right.
gear. Like
we have an employee at the range that is now in the Houston Police Academy. She's 110 pounds if she's carrying 10 pounds of
Michaela
stuff with her. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we follow each other on Instagram.
Okay. Yeah, she's one, and more power to her. I'm so happy she's doing that. I'm proud of her for doing it. I'm glad somebody's doing it. I wouldn't do it again on the street today. I'll just put that out there. But I can remember back when the training that we went through initially, right? And then the training that I'm hearing and she's telling me what's happening and the equipment that they're using now is like night and day. It's like Flintstone cars versus today's cars, really. So if you had to pin it down to something that is probably not a fair question, but which do you think is a more important aspect? Red dots on guns, the ability to use patrol rifles, or something else completely?
And if you want to edit out her last name, I probably shouldn't have said her last name. See, that's a tough question too, right? So
that's my point.
Let's not attack. That sounds bad. Let's discuss patrol rifles and then discuss red dots, right? So patrol rifles. Where I work, we've seen, so you got plate readers everywhere, right? You guys familiar with plate readers?
Sure.
And then we have a radio frequency. It's kind of like a mutual aid that goes for multiple states and counties and whatever. So we're constantly getting hits, right? Like, so in the last couple of years, I grabbed a guy wanted for homicide out of New York City on 95. Another guy ran from NYPD, was in a car chase and had menaced somebody with a handgun. And then another city of Mount Vernon, guy was just involved in a shooting, right? So those are a few good examples. Do felony car stops, right? So everybody's got a patrol rifle, right? So got the rifle, giving commands over to PA. Other guys come who also have rifles. How many other rifles came out? 0, right? So you got a good rifle program, you got rifles, it's right there. Just unlock the thing, take it out, charge it, and get ready, right? Especially somebody wanted for a murder, right?
Felony stops.
Yeah. A guy who just menaced someone with a handgun and got in a lengthy chase with NYPD, and now he's stopping for me, which probably tells you he threw his gun out the window or something. And then another car with guy got in a gunfight. So wouldn't you want to use your rifles there? If you're going to bring if
you have the option of using a rifle, use a rifle.
Right. And all of those, and sometimes guys will look at you and they're like looking at the rifle, like, why do you have that out? Because the guy's wanted for a homicide, or the guy just did a shoot. Like, so it's great that we have them, but are people using them, at least where I am? And I'm always about advancing, right? So we started off with Colt 69 33s, and then the EPR came out. All right, let's upgrade the guns to EPRs, right? Hey, guys, he's got the super select fire trigger. Let's put that in there and get a nice godly trigger. Hey, let's get suppressors and put suppressors, like always advancing. Not all firearms instructors will continue that heritage if they take over a program from someone who's like that. So patrol rifles are great, and they should be in every car, but here's the other part of it too. If you put a patrol rifle in every NYPD car, forget about the money. Let's say, the money fell out of heaven and you can afford to train them all and give them all the guns. All of those guns would be stolen. They'd be stealing them right out of their cars. That's why,
along with the tires.
Yeah. Like if you look at, like, I held the Colt Armor course one year at our agency, and the guy teaching it was a cop in California, and he showed pictures of motorcycles that had gun locks for their ARs, and they had ARs on their motorcycles. And there were some NYPD guys in the class, and took the words right out of my mouth. Those motorcycles wouldn't last 5 seconds on the streets of New York because we'd take your rifle. Not the cops, but the bad guys would take your rifle. So Some of it is just, I'm not a gun guy, or maybe he's a buff because he's got that rifle out again. And even before rifles, we had shotguns. And if I'm going to point a gun at it, I'm going to point the most devastating, highest capacity, accurate gun as I can, right? And I deployed a shotgun, and guys wouldn't deploy a shotgun. So that's part of it. And even NYPD, when they had, there's a few different agents or organizations that deploy the rifles. One or two of them, they had to get like a sergeant there before they can like pull the rifle out and deploy it. So now you have administrators going, let's screw this up, right? Let's screw this up for guys so they can't just bring out the gun anytime they feel they need to, which is how it should be, right? So I think that kind of answers the rifle part of it. And there's been obviously a lot of advancements. I talked about how we upgraded our rifles. The red dots. I think, especially as a 49-year-old who, we go on the indoor range tomorrow, you give me a gun with iron sights, I'll still shoot 80-ish to 90-ish maybe if I'm lucky and just doing everything right on a B8 at 25. But you give me the red dot, or we get my time machine and I go back in time, yeah, I can shoot 90s on B8s again with iron sights. But as I'm getting older, having that red dot for me, with 49-year-old eyeballs, I think that's the way to go. Is there a learning curve? Yeah, there's definitely a learning curve to find the red dot. And I remember years ago when I first picked up a gun with a red dot, I think it was like Salient Arms was one of the only people that were doing it, I think, back at the time with an RMR on it. And I picked it up and I was like, what the hell? And it was in a Larry Vickers class. And he was like, oh yeah, try this. I'm like, all right, there it is. But hey man, you can have this back. I don't even want to shoot it.
You know, dots have been out long enough now that there are people that haven't learned on iron sights. Yeah. So they have a very limited learning curve because they're not having to unlearn.
That's a good point.
Because this younger generation,
Call of Duty.
The Call of Duty, perfect. Yeah, they can pick up the gun. They've never worried about the iron sights. You might as well file them off. And, you know, they're working the red dot. But like me, I shot for 40 years with iron sights. So the first time I bolted a red dot to a gun, I'm doing exactly what you said. I'm saying, what the hell? You know, I'm trying to figure out, and I'm trying to make that red dot sit exactly on the top of my front sight before I squeeze the trigger. So I was super slow getting that gun to go. And it took a minute.
So I think the red dots are definitely good. My only hesitation, again, we're all gun guys in this room. People watching us are probably going to be gun guys. That's not going to be a problem. Because I've done red dot classes, and people come in and they're struggling, and by the end of the class, they could find the red dot. I can't think of the word, repetitively or on the regular, right? The issues have gone away. They've kind of learned how to figure it out. Now it's just keeping that practice up, so you got no problem finding the red dot on the regular. But I think the average cop, you got the Call of Duty generation, right? So they're used to seeing a red dot on their TV screen when they're playing Call of Duty. But I look at some of the cops I've worked with, and I go, man, we're going to take that guy who can barely qualify on a BS standard with iron sights, and then we're going to try to teach him, that guy over there in the corner, we're going to teach him. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure it's going to translate well across the board. Like we just got, like right now I'm the only one with the red dot on my gun. The money's in there. They're going to buy it and they're going to start teaching people or whatever. And that's someone else's project. I just kind of help it come to fruition. But I'm interested to see, and I hope it happens before I retire next year, because I'm interested to see how that shakes out, because I just don't think the average cop that's already been on iron sights, I'll be interested to see if they'll be able to find the red dot. Like
they're going to have to. They're going to have to. We see it in the industry. Nobody is even putting out a new model that's not compatible. Even revolvers. TARS has a whole line of revolvers that are cut for red dots. So we're seeing it in the industry that red dots have become so commonplace, it's almost a mandatory piece of equipment on your firearm now.
And I think you probably made a good point before, like in the academy, if you start them off in the academy and it becomes, you either pass or you're out.
Yeah.
Here's the caveat, right? So I talked about friends in the NYPD. They have guys, and they've lowered the standards to higher. People forget about red dots. They still got irons. They're starting to integrate the red dot program. They're failing. You have a 6-month academy. They give them extra, come on your off time, do this, thousands of rounds, still failing, right? Arbitrary BS police standard qualification course. They're not making it. They're being directed, don't fire them. Save them. And by law in New York, you have 1 year to become certified.
You recycle them.
They recycle them for firearms. They've passed academically. They've passed the physical fitness test. They recycle them. And after 1 year of all this firearms training, they have to get fired. They don't want them fired. They're telling, and the instructors are like, no, we'll make this a union issue if it has to. You want to jam us up for refusing to pass them. You want to break our chops, whatever. We'll make it a union issue, but we're not sending these people out on the street if they can't pass the qual, especially after a year. It's bad enough you can't do it after 6 months, but a year, so if you got people like that, and now you got to teach them how to find the red dot, which just a little bit of a learning curve on how is that going to shake out. So that's my only concern, but it goes back to this is the standard, meet it or do the duffel bag drag.
At some point, they have to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and granted, yes, for somebody that shot irons, or maybe it's just they don't have the basics of grip and stance and all that, because that's where you find the red dot, is how you present the firearm.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can't get past that point, they're never going to find the red dot anyway, regardless. So
it becomes, do you start them on the red dot? I've heard both arguments.
You 100%, in my opinion, you 100% start them on the red dot. 100%. If they can learn to shoot the dot, they can learn to shoot the irons.
It'd be interesting to take, like, say, an NYPD class, do half start them on irons, and then switch them to red, like redo the program after they've done the irons, right? I mean, obviously, a lot of money and time, so they probably wouldn't be feasible, but do that and then start the other ones on the red dots. Like, don't even put irons on the gun, and then go back and see kind of how that shakes out for your average cop. I'd be interested to see how that works out.
Yeah, Aaron Cowan for Sage Dynamics did something similar to that. I don't know if you guys ever saw that a couple years ago, but he basically he does like force up force training, and he did like iron sights versus red dots basically on newer shooters. And then I want to say he swapped them, if I remember. That's how he did it, just to see what their hit factor is in scenario-based training. And it was a pretty significant increase with the red dot, because you have the target focus. And I don't know if you guys have read any stuff on, I mean, you've been through shootings before, but on police shootings, like some of the psychology and stuff that happens. There's a lot of people that if you're trained to that level, like a lot of the cops are, when they get into an actual situation, they're not looking at their sights.
No, they're just blazing away.
Yeah, shooting instinctively. So I'm a big fan of the red dots now, just like.
Well, along that line, there's a valid training technique that quite a few people use, is once, at some point during the red dot training, they'll tape it. They'll put tape across the front.
Yeah.
There's a caveat to that, though, too, and that's eye convergence. And I just seen this not that long ago. I'm trying to remember who shared it. But when I did the red dot instructor class for those NYPD guys, one of them was having a hard time with the occlusion. And it was like the next day I ran into this thing. And it's something about like your eyes. I'll see if I have it on my phone, and I'll show it to you tomorrow at the class. But the way your eye, like your point of aim, for lack of a better term, with your eye, like where your eye like focuses or looks versus where your other eye. I don't know if I'm making sense. So one eye sees the dot, the other eye sees the target, but they may kind of your vision.
Your brain is supposed to make that into one side.
Right, but there's a certain percentage or something of the population where the vision is kind of crossing, or the eyes are starting to cross. I'll find it on my phone tomorrow. I screenshot it and I'll show it to you. Where I think it's called eye convergence. Like maybe your eyes are starting to go crossed or whatever.
Almost like a parallax issue, but with your eyes.
Yeah, something with your eyes. When we get done here, I'll pull it up on my phone and show you guys. So, and it made sense to me because it was literally like the day after I did that class for the NYPD guys, and that one guy's like, dude, I can't friggin' do that. Like my eyes are hurting, and he was struggling with it. And I'm like, well, there you go. There's an answer for you on why that happens. Yeah. So
I've always shot both eyes open.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, pistols, rifles, shotguns, whatever. I've always shot, even through a scope, I shoot both eyes open. And it's always worked well for me. Mm-hmm. But I've had a few people in classes that we've done at the range that just couldn't do it. It was just giving them some kind of acuity problem. It was giving, and it may be cross dominance, maybe the issue, or something was giving them the problem. But they were finally said, okay, let's try it. Go ahead and close that second eye. Go ahead and close that off eye. And all of a sudden, now they're doing what they need to do. So, okay, whatever. I'm not married to both eyes open. Whatever it takes to make you hit.
What I've noticed with myself, just checking zeros and stuff, I can turn my dot up, zero it, right? Like my duty gun, I'm one down from full bright, because if it's a sunny day and something happens,
right,
I need it up. But if it's too bright and I'm indoors, and yeah, you could turn your flashlight on and that'll help. But so I just keep it one down from fully bright. And I've tried zeros, fully bright, dim down all the way, closing an eye, all that. And each one of them, I'll put B8s out at 25 and I'll shoot like 10 rounds. Each one of them will be slightly different from the other, like consistently, not just, all right, that one I was pushing my groups left or right or whatever, but consistently it moves in the same directions.
For me, the brighter the dot, the greater the dot subtends at distance. In other words, dot has, for me, I guess it's fuzz, for lack of a better term. You have a bright dot, it's fuzzy on the edges for me because of my eyesight. Mm-hmm. So if I have a really bright dot, what is a 3 MOA dot might effectively be a 5 MOA dot, so consequently I have my groups get bigger at distance. And that's just my eyeballs making it do that.
Yeah, no, everybody's going to be a little bit different. For sure. I think too, like what you're saying about having the red dot and the hit percentages going up. Think about like you have a gun out, you're giving somebody commands. You're going to see, especially if it's bright enough, your dot intensity. You're going to go, oh yeah, there's that dot. And I'll give you an example. I went to the FBI I went to FBI Firearms Instructor School, but I was going to say Officer Survival School a couple months back, and they didn't have red dots on the sim guns for the scenarios, but they had. Was it the Ameriglow? It's got the big orange dot. It's a night sight, but then like fluorescent paint or whatever. And I'm giving a guy commands, and all of a sudden he's a threat now, and I start shooting him, and I can see, like I was looking at his face or something, or his gun, whatever I was looking at, and I can see in my peripheral the dot is down here of the iron sights, and I'm like, oh yeah, sights. I brought it up, and then out in the street, I had a guy running one time not that long ago, and he's running on the sidewalk, and I'm like, hey, stop. And I cut him off. I drove the car up on the sidewalk, opened the door, and he dove his hands in his pockets. So I drew my pistol out, and I'm like watching to see what he's pulling out, like get on the ground, all of that stuff. And while I'm looking at his hands and giving him commands, in my peripheral, I have an acro. So, people make fun of the size, but because of the size of the acro, I'm like, oh yeah, make sure you see your dot if you got to shoot. Like it was so obvious in my peripheral vision. So, yeah, I can definitely see how the red dot, just using those two examples, will make you use your sights versus not use them, or help you to remember to use your sights, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I wonder if the incorporation of dots will see an increase in the average police hit ratio. I believe last time I checked, it's like 10%.
I believe they have. I mean, with just
certain agencies.
Yeah, with agencies that have the dots, whether it's passing quals and accuracy and all
provided they have, provided the training is beyond just start raining bullets out, and so that's still a problem. We were, by the way, back to the old days, we were taught the point method with the revolver, the one-handed in the center point kind of thing.
Nice.
I'm glad that went away. And then Weaver,
you're talking about when you drop into that squatting.
Yeah.
FBI
100%. Yeah. We did the speed rock at 3 yards, and then at 5 yards we did the squat deal. And it was at Target with the dude with the black hair with the gun sticking out in front of him. That Target, and that's still used, by the way, by I think Homeland Security.
Think about how stupid that is, right? That squatting thing.
Oh, it was dumb.
I did that once for real.
To us, it was the coolest thing in the world.
I did it once for real, never having been taught it. And long story short, interrupted a robbery. Chick had a gun, and we couldn't tell for sure she had a gun, but she's down this long, narrow hallway, and I jump around the corner. Police, don't move. And then one of the guys who was with me just leans his head and his gun around the corner, like and I'm like,
yeah, that was probably a better idea.
Probably a better idea. Yeah. That whole incident got worse because I had that choker, guns to her head. That was yeah. So sometimes you do weird things in real life. That's why some instructors, like there's I don't want to beat anyone up, but you see some civilian instructors who've never been involved in anything, and they're like, you won't do this in a gunfight. And you think that because you've never been involved in anything, and you've never
all bets are off.
Yeah, weird shit happens.
Everything slows down. You don't hear shit. Everything goes wrong at one time.
And you do things you weren't necessarily. I mean, I shot a guy being choked and like leaning it, like that's, you don't do retention shooting by giving the guy the gun, which eventually he grabbed. But things in the street go different. Yes, you need to have that training and the whole you won't rise to the occasion thing, default to your level training. There's truth to that, but it doesn't always go perfect. There's it's kind of like CQB, right? Guy in front of you goes left, you go right. But if you go left too, the next guy's just going to go right, and you fill it in and you adapt. There's a reason why that, that kind of mindset is out there. Those things are talked about. Is sometimes you do the wrong thing, or you zig instead of zagging like you should have. Yeah. Sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. So,
well, the bad guy in the situation, they didn't set it up. Okay, this is going to be a chapter 8, page 42 scenario.
I mean, you don't get a walkthrough like IPSC?
No, absolutely not.
And I'm not. You should shoot competition. It won't get you killed in the streets.
Design. You don't get that.
Yeah, it was always.
Go ahead.
I was going to say it was always weird when we did our training for hot stops. Mm-hmm. The caveat at the beginning of training is you're never going to do a hot stop like this. I'm like, well, then why are we
doing it?
Why are we doing it this way? Like, we should set up a scenario and make it all messy like we would really. But they always had like very specific, you got to park your car right here. You got to have one person here. This person established, whatever it is.
The wheels are angled this way.
The wheels are angled so you can take cover behind them at this angle, like that kind of thing. But then they would always say, you're never going to do it like this in the field, which we never really did. It was always much messier than it was,
You're going to have to box people in.
And there's traffic and there's non-shoots around, there's non-combatants around.
That's why
all holding cell phones.
A lot of this stuff, like some of the VCQB stuff, I'm not a fan of that. But if you look at some of their, and I don't want to put like a lot of tactic stuff out there, but you look at the move to the rear of the car, and have you ever tried doing a felony stop from the rear of the car? Just doing it in training, and guys couldn't see everything and talk, and so people come up with all these ideas. We're going to do this and we're going to do that, and it just doesn't.
A lot of it's not practical. Like we were using our speakers a lot of the time in the car, or PA, and you had to be at the door so you can hold the microphone. Like you had to do that.
And I've heard people say because of this whole VCQB thing, like, oh, we'll just put speakers at the rear now, like in the trunk, and you put it, like whatever. I don't want to go down the road of bashing that whole thing, but I'm not a fan of that.
Well, man, we look forward to tomorrow.
Yeah, me too. And I'll be back down here. Well, I'll be back down in Texas a bunch of times this year. I was up in DFW last month, here tomorrow, and I'll be back down here November 3rd. So September, I'm kind of like zigzagging in my schedule here in my brain. September, I'll be back up in DFW for another marksmanship class. So the same class I'm doing down here, I'll be doing up in DFW in September. October, just south of Dallas for a 2-day advanced pistol class. And then November 2nd, doing a 1-day shotgun at that same range, just a little south of Dallas. Packing up there, driving down here, November 3rd, doing a low light pistol class here with you guys. So
nice.
Cool. How many classes are you doing a year?
So about 15. You got to remember, I'm still full time.
Oh no, I get it. Yeah.
So when I retire next year, the idea is to kind of do things more full time. But I also just got a potential thing to do in retirement that might keep me in New York for a little bit longer.
I've retired 3 times. It just doesn't.
It's
stick.
a good thing, and it's like a good opportunity. And
it does not stick.
And I'm like, man, I can't turn that down. Do I really want to stay in New York? No, but like I can't turn that down. So I should be able to still, the schedule should be a little more fluid or whatever than being a cop, and be able to travel more and do more classes.
Nice. Where can people find you?
So StretzTactical.com, STRETZ Tactical.com. Also on Instagram at Stretz Tactical, YouTube, Facebook, all of that stuff. And yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Got anything?
Awesome.
You got anything?
I'm good.
I think we're good.
Perfect. Guys, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the notification, send us an email. What else?
Check out the BTO Range YouTube channel.
Check out the BTO Range
YouTube. Yeah.
Andrew over there puts out some, 2 videos a week?
Yeah, we're at 78 videos up now.
Nice. Lots of knowledge. So thanks for tuning in. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me, bro.
Yeah. Be safe. Send us lunch.
Send us lunch.
I'm still waiting on somebody to send us fucking lunch.
I'll buy lunch today. How's that?
For weeks.
Cool. All right. Thanks, fellas. Appreciate you.